The following program sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts.
About money, a different approach to investing you won't hear anywhere else. Your host, Mike Adams, is a registered investment advisor and works with investment portfolios exceeding over $100,000 in net worth, and has a proven track record of managing long-term investments surpassing the markets in the long term. The information shared on the following program is for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. And now, here's Mike.
So it is time to talk about money. You know, I believe that history doesn't repeat, but that it rhymes. And so today we're going to do some historical facts, and it does apply to today. There are applications. But I thought there's some interesting things to talk about. One, did you know that the Eiffel Tower was sold not once, but twice by a conman? He sold it twice. You know, there's an old expression, when somebody believes something that's far-fetched, you can say, you know, I've got a bridge I'll sell. Talks about the Brooklyn Bridge. Well, today, not about the Brooklyn Bridge, but we're going to talk a little bit about the Eiffel Tower that was sold twice. That's coming later in the program. I've got a great guest today, got an interesting story, some insight into what's going on in Seattle. And I want to start by taking you back to 1470s. Yeah, 1470s. What was going on in the 1470s? The Gutenberg Bible, and books were starting to be printed. And the first printed books were coming off the press in Augsburg, Germany. Article out of The Economist talked about that because the wood engravers rose up. They were protesting the fact that they were printing books. They saw their jobs disappearing. There was new technology. Books were being printed. They weren't being hand transcribed. And they were worried they were going to lose their jobs. But you know what? They didn't lose their jobs because the skills they had developed doing the wood carving and doing the illustrations applied to illustrating books. And they found that they were in greater demand with that than they were even doing their presses and engraving. So today there's a lot of concern about artificial intelligence, what that's going to do. You know, but what's happening is as we're growing through this whole period of time, there's 5 million people, according to the World Bank book, that are working remotely. No longer working at an office where they have to work. They're working remotely. And what we've also seen in the last 10 or 15 years is the rise of what's called the gig economy. It's a number of freelance workers that you can give work to, that they are doing miscellaneous projects. And worldwide, McKinsey has done a study, and they found up to 162 million people worldwide are working in the gig economy. That's an economy where you take one gig after another. You do a project, you do another project. And if you look at that, what that is, that's 20 to 30% of the working age population in the U.S. You know, if you just specify the U.S. And if you look at how that's composed, about 3 out of 10 of those people that are working in the gig economy are working as free agents. That's what they intend to do. They are doing that specifically. Go to some of the websites, alternative.hub, go to alternativehub.com. Go to some of the websites, freelance.com. You'll find these people. You want to design a website, you want to design a logo, you can put it out there, and you'll have dozens of people, not maybe hundreds of people, that will bid on doing that. And they will give you a price, and they will give you a sample of what it will look like. We did that for one of the presentations. I think it cost a total of less than $35 for a presentation logo that we wanted to do. And not only was it a presentation logo, but it had all sorts of moving parts. If we'd gone to a regular firm to do that, it would have been hundreds of dollars. And yet here it was. I think it was $35 that we paid for that. So 3 out of 10 of them are working because they're free agents, and that's how they earn their income. 4 out of 10 are doing it as supplemental work. They have a regular job, but they do this on the side to supplement the income they're bringing in. So almost half, it's supplemental work. There's about 14% of that percentage that are actually doing it because they would like to have a regular job, but they can't find a regular job. They're stuck in doing gig after gig after gig because they can't find a regular job. They would prefer to have a regular job, and maybe when they do get a regular job, they'll move out of this category. But they're providing income for themselves doing this. And then there's 16% that are doing it because they have to. They're financially strapped. It's the only thing they can do to make the income they need. You know, the gig economy in 2011 was generating $1.17 trillion in revenues for the gig workers. By 2020, it's expected to double to $2.1 trillion. That's a significant change when people talk about the employment rate and the unemployment rate of being 4.1% or 4.2% or 4.5%. A number of people who are not entering the workforce, they're not looking for a job, are involved in the gig economy, and they're going to continue to work there. It's a big portion of the workforce that's working there. You know, when you take that into consideration, you have to consider what's going on in this economy. And there are people that are saying that we've reached a time in which the economy is going to be slowing down. Been a couple articles recently about Robert Gordon, who's probably the best noted person, talking about the new economy. But in his words, the new economy is a slow economy. Based out of Northwestern University, he's just written a book. I'm not going to talk about the name of the book, but he says that there were 3 cycles that were going on in the U.S. From 1750 to 1830, you had the steam engine, you had cotton spinning, and you had railroads, and that generated a lot of growth, and it did. From 1870 to 1900, you had the advent of electricity, the internal combustion engine, running water, and probably running water was the most important of the 3. And again, you had an explosive kind of growth. And then from 1960 to 1990s, you had the computer. But since the 1990s, he said, innovation has really slowed down, and we're entering a time of slow innovation, slow productivity, and slow growth. And if you look at the numbers, productivity has not been keeping up with the average that's gone on. Now, when I read all this stuff, I begin to think about Thomas Malthus. Malthus was an economist who lived in 1766 to 1834. He was an English scholar, economist, and he believed that improvements in agricultural productivity could not go on forever. He believed that reached the maximum production for agriculture. And the result was there was going to be a limit of the amount of food that could be produced. And when the population grows faster than the food supply, wages go down, famines go up. And in fact, famines were a good thing, epidemics were a good thing, wars were good, because all of those reduced population growth. That was Malthus. He celebrated celibacy and wanted people to get married much later in life and have fewer children because that reduced the population. And he was one who argued against the poor laws. You know, today that's unemployment and food stamps. He said, let people die. Let people die. It's better. You know, that was in the 1760s to 1834. I just looked at the numbers. If you look at 1850, soon after the death of Malthus, almost 50% of the U.S. population was employed on the farm. We had a population of 23 million. 11 million were employed on the farm, 11 out of 23 million. Today, of the total population, there's fewer than 1 million people who live on the farms, and yet we're producing 600 times what we produced in 1850. the concept of Malthus seen in 1850 is the same thing as going back in time and talking to an Indian chief, a Sioux Indian, for example, who's gazing over the lands and the herds of buffalo and asking him if he would ever see a time when all that would disappear. And from what he could see, he could not imagine a hurricane flooding a town like Houston. You know, times changed, things change, and we're entering one of those. Gordon feels that things are terrible. We've reached the peak of innovation. He's not the only one. Galbraith did that in the 1950s and 60s, said that we'd reached the highest affluence we'd ever reached. 1,100-foot home was the mess. One car per family, that was as good as it gets. Large companies were going to do 2/3 of the output. Small companies did not have the capital and weren't able to compete. You know, that's where these things grow up. And people begin to believe that. And people begin to invest based on that. Now we're coming up to a break shortly, and I want to talk about the beginning of the 19th century because, again, another example of what's going on in terms of technology. Because in 1879, Thomas Edison developed the first incandescent light bulb. He worked on one after another. And we're going to come back after this break, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
About Money with Mike Adams will resume in a moment on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Did you know the 20-year annualized S&P return was 8.19%, while the 20-year annualized return for the average equity mutual fund investor was just 4.67%? That's a gap of 3.52%. It doesn't sound like much now, but it could mean the difference between retiring in comfort and running out of money. For some seniors, a gap that large could cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars and cut their retirement short. Don't run out of money. Call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts today, 206-903-1019, and learn more about how you can, 1, create wealth for retirement, and 2, protect yourself from running out of money. Adams Financial Concepts specializes in creating and maintaining wealth. Call today, 206-903-1019, or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
We're back with more about money. For details on what you hear on today's show, visit adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Now, here again is Mike Adams.
So welcome back. Maybe it sounds like we're doing a history lesson today. In some ways we are. We started in 1470. We talked with Malthus back in the 1700s. We've been talking about things that are leading up. And I assure you that there's some application today. But I want to take you back to 1879. I want to take you back to the end of the 19th century when Thomas Edison developed the first incandescent light bulb. And there was a lot of work. It wasn't like he suddenly had this idea in his head. He put all this together, and the first thing he tried worked. No, they tried thousands of combinations to finally get an incandescent light bulb. But it worked on direct current. Now, when the difference between direct current and alternating current is what you have in your house. Direct current, you have a positive and a negative. You can think of a flashlight or a battery. On a battery, you have a positive pole and a negative. That's direct current. It flows conventionally from the positive to the negative. In fact, it flows negative to positive, but that's another whole subject. We're not going to talk about electricity that much. But it was direct current, and that's what he developed. And the issue with direct current is it doesn't travel very far before it decays. So you had at most 100, 150, 200 feet from where you were generating the direct current to where you could use it. So he hired a guy by the name of Nikola Tesla. Yes, and that's the guy after whom the car is named. Nikola Tesla was a 28-year-old Serbian was a mathematician, and he had this idea for alternating current. And he was hired by Edison. And Edison listened to his ideas and then fired him because he said the idea was completely impractical. So Tesla, hearing this, there was another famous person by the name of George Westinghouse who went with Tesla, hired Tesla, bought some of Tesla's patents, and began to put into effect alternating current. Alternating current is, it will move electrons one way for a while, back and forth, but in total, you send the current downstream. And by putting in transformers, you can increase the voltage between transformers and then decrease it as it's delivered to a house or delivered to a light bulb. And Edison, being the type of person he was, sued Westinghouse for $1 billion. Now this is the 1890s. 1890s. $1 billion was a lot more money in the 1890s than it is today. $1 billion was catastrophic for Westinghouse. So it's an interesting story. It's a long story. We're not going to go through the story. But eventually, Edison lost. Westinghouse won. The alternating current won out over direct current. And as they reconciled, Edison and Westinghouse, Edison had this to say to Westinghouse, and I'm quoting, he says, "Our age of invention," explained to Edison, "these days of handcrafted miracles, they won't last much longer. Does that ever worry any of you? Light bulbs, electricity, it seems likely ours will be the last generation to ever gaze wide-eyed at something truly novel. Our generation will be the last to ever gaze at something truly novel. That our kind will be the last to ever stare in disbelief at a man-made thing that could not possibly exist. We made wonders," Edison said. That, and he added, that could not no, that's true. But it won't be like this. It will, and I just lost my notes. It will be more technical. Inside the magic box, not outside. A light bulb is intuitive. An X-ray is practically alchemy. The machines are becoming so infernally complicated that barely a soul can even conceptualize how they work. And moreover, they won't need to in order to use these things. From here in, we can only build incrementally. You know, do you remember the first time you ever saw a light bulb work? That was in the 1890s, talking about electricity and there being the last generation, that's how they visualized it, the last generation to ever see those kind of wonders. But when you look at what happened, because of electricity, it didn't get invented one day and suddenly become implemented. It took 20 or 30 years for electrical power to become common and to move into households. Think about it. My parents didn't have a dishwasher. You know, you washed dishes by hand. In fact, when we got dishwashers, if you really wanted clean dishes, you washed them by hand. The dishwasher didn't do such a good job. Today, if you want really clean dishes, you put them in the dishwasher because washing by hand doesn't do such a good job. There weren't washing machines. It was the 1962 World's Fair in Seattle where they showed the microwave for the first time. You know, going back to grandparents' days, some of them didn't have refrigerators. It took a long time for that invention of electricity to have the impact it does today. And yet, without electricity, we wouldn't have computers that run. You know, I play chess, and I never believed that a computer would ever beat a human being. If after 3 moves, a computer analyzes the rest of the moves, you know, for the first 3 moves, there's 9 million different combinations. For 4 million, or for 4 moves, 288 billion moves. That's the kind of thing. And as I thought about that in chess, I thought, how could a computer ever do something where a human being had a strategy? He could look at the board, get a picture in his mind of a strategy that needed to be implemented, and go on to win. Always, I thought, the computer would always lose. And then came along Big Blue that beat the Russian champion. It was only a few years ago, 2011, that we had Jeopardy and Watson. You know, we're moving into an age which, in my opinion, is similar to that time of Edison and Westinghouse. If you look at it, we had Envelop VR on the program, virtual reality, and they were working with a car manufacturer, and they said they were looking at parts, and I'd put on the glasses. I looked, you could hold this part, you could twist it all around, you could look at it in every way. You know, the car manufacturer said that it would take their engineers 2 days to design a complete part. With virtual reality, 15 minutes. If you look at a jet engine, in the old days, you'd have to do a drawing. You'd have to send it out to a lathe or mold, build a prototype, try it out. And after the trial, you'd have to send it back to drawings to have it redone, build a second prototype. It could take months for that to happen. Today, you have computer-aided design. You design it on the computer. You send it to a 3D printer with metal powder. You build the part. You can test it. You can make a modification. You can do 5 or 6 per day. Instead of taking months, you take days. We're reaching the point of moving in that direction. The idea of this program is to put you, the listener, ahead of the curve and not behind the curve, for you to understand what's coming and not what's been, for you to be invested in the things of the future and not the things of the past. You know, pity the poor people that in Westinghouse day put their fortune into buggy whips or into ice wagons. They were real, and they were real investments, but they didn't last long. Today, we face some of the same things, and it's happening more quickly. The idea of the program is to put you ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve. So that wraps that up. I want to introduce my guest today. He's got a great story to tell. Jeff
Pelletier.
I want to say it the French way, and it just comes out. Of Board and Vellum. Welcome to the program, Jeff.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with your background. Tell us about your background.
Okay, I'm an East Coast boy. I grew up in New England, went to school at Cornell University, got my degree in architecture there. Lived in New York City for about a year, but realized it wasn't the right city for me. So came out to Seattle in 2001, and I've loved it ever since. So I've worked at a variety of small to large firms here. I'm an architect. And so then I founded my company, Board and Vellum Architecture and Design, back in 2011.
So tell me about the name, Board and Vellum.
It's definitely a nod to old school. So vellum is the kind of paper that architects have historically drafted on with ink, and board is the drafting board. And so I didn't want my name on the door. I wanted to be more about the sort of art and practice of architecture. And so Board and Vellum was it.
That's great. So as we're coming again to a commercial break soon, but after the commercial break, we want to get into what you do, what you see happening with this real estate market, because Seattle has become the hottest real estate market in the U.S. We see more cranes here. We see tremendous numbers of residential units going up. We're seeing new businesses. We're seeing 50,000 people move in to Seattle in the last 4 years and 100,000 into the county. Tremendous changes going on, and you're right in the midst of it.
Certainly. It's been pretty exciting to see. I joke it's kind of equally horrifying and exciting all at once to see how quickly the city's changing, but certainly a lot of insight there.
And it's, there's positives and negatives to it.
Absolutely. I mean, there's benefits to the fact that we're improving the city left and right, we're improving the infrastructure, but we're also pricing people out of housing. And so it's double-edged sword, certainly.
That's great. We're going to come back and talk about this. Don't go away. We've got a lot more to cover.
More About Money coming up with Mike Adams on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Now we return to About Money. There's more information waiting for you at adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here again is your host, Mike Adams.
Welcome back. I'm here with Jeff Pelletier. I got it right this time. Of Board and Vellum. So we had talked about your background, but let's talk about what Board and Vellum does.
Yeah, certainly. So we're a 30-person architecture, landscape architecture, interior design firm. We do a lot of single-family work, remodels, and new construction. Some mixed-use development, apartments throughout the city, and retail, commercial, office space, and like a city park.
So talk about some of the unusual projects you've had.
Well, we tend to get the unusual projects. That's sort of kind of our DNA for the most part. On the sort of commercial front, we've done Ada's Technical Books and Cafe up on Capitol Hill, which is a great little locally owned coffee shop, bookstore, co-working space, and event space. That's super unique. And we do a lot of remodels.
Tell us why it was unique.
Well, it's a great business model where they sell technical books, which sounds pretty normal, but it's really fun, interesting, science-based books, and it really taps into what's happening in Seattle right now in terms of the culture. And they really knew that there was value in the architecture design of the space, that it would actually be a draw to customers. And it's worked out really well.
Okay. Tell us about another.
Well, let's see. So we have a great project at 68th and Roosevelt under construction right now by W.G. Clark. And it's 106 units, kind of a mid-scale apartment building in terms of what's being built right now in the city, but has a really dynamic ground floor that has kind of an open air kind of walkway through the building to help sort of invigorate retail along the street and inside the building as well.
And are there retail spaces on the bottom floor? Is that...
There are, and one of the things I'm excited by is that we have at least 3 kind of covered outdoor seating areas for people. This morning it rained a little bit, and I was thinking, this would be a great morning to actually have a coffee, but undercover somewhere. So trying to bring back the outdoor seating in Seattle.
That's great.
Yeah.
So tell us about what you see going on in Seattle. You see probably sooner than most people see, because when things are changing, they come to the architect.
Yeah.
So
things are on fire, to be quite frank. I get asked all the time, do I see things slowing down or increasing? Because we're sort of the first people to see any change. It's only increasing, to be honest. The city's growing. People are moving here nonstop, and they're moving here with really good jobs, or they're well-paying jobs. And so what we're seeing is a tremendous pressure on the single-family home market right now. People cannot move. And so what happens is that people who typically would move out of their house and buy a bigger house can't. They can't move in. So what they're finding more economical is actually to remodel that house and invest, put the money in it. They'll get it back always and make it what they want. And part of that challenge in terms of the pressure in the single-family market is that a lot of people moving to Seattle, whether they have one kid or no kids, they'd like to be downtown or in the city and buy a condo. And there simply are not condos to buy. And so they're either renting or they're trying to buy a house. It's putting unbelievable pressure on the single-family market right now in Seattle.
And there's a real shortage of new homes in King County.
It's massive. I mean, I'm a big fan of kind of social justice. There's a lot of talk about affordable housing being a need. But honestly, it's all the same market. We need more affordable housing. We need more luxury housing. We need more mid-range housing. older properties eventually, become a little more affordable and they trickle down. And so we need all sorts of property being built right now in the city.
And so when you talk about people remodeling their house, how do they go about that process?
Seattle's a unique city. So, most cities, people tend to think, oh, I'll call a contractor, I'll remodel my kitchen or add on a little family room. People are pretty savvy here in Seattle, and they know that having a full team makes sense. So we'll typically get a call as an architect, and they'll say, I want to make a plan. I know I have some money to spend. I'm not sure what that gets me. And so we work with them figuring out kind of what's a good investment for their property, what makes the most sense, and how to sort of effectively add on or remodel their home.
And so you work with their own budget, help them develop the budget.
Yep.
And
which is, I'll say, a moving target right now because the market is just hot. I kind of joke with my clients at the first meeting because they'll have saved up a lot of money and they'll think they have a lot of time, and I'll sort of sadly say, well, that's amazing, but I'm here to crush your dreams. And then build them back up, of course, because you still can do a lot with some money here in Seattle.
So in terms of the people that are building new homes and remodeling, do you have an idea of what those statistics are, or a sense of somewhere close to what's happening there?
Do you mean in terms of the amount, or what's the
amount?
So new homes are hard. There just are very few sites. And so those are few and far between in city. And so farther out, there's still fewer lots, and we're just not getting enough houses being built anywhere in the urban growth boundary. Remodels, though, are happening left and right. And that's, I think a big part of that is that people just simply can't move. And they're expensive because it's like playing a game of operation. When you're a kid, you have to sort of get that needle in there and not hit the sides. It's surgical, precise work, and it's very custom. So it's a little harder.
And so you mentioned landscaping too. Mm-hmm. Tell us about the landscaping side.
Yeah, so we have currently 3 landscape architects. And what's, I think, a big value right now for your own remodeling dollar, if you're in city, you typically have a pretty small lot. Your house is maybe a few thousand square feet, but you have a couple thousand square feet of yard. And it's pretty nice here for a good 4 months of the year. And so we're big fans of using your outdoor space and having it function like outdoor rooms. And that's become a real value add we've seen with our clients, is being able to show them that you don't just get to remodel your house or build a new house, you also get to use all the space on your property. And so whether it's you have an outdoor space with a fire pit and a couch and maybe a covered area with a table, or a play area for your kids, or a driveway that has a gate that functions both as a driveway and a patio. It's using every square foot you have and using it to the best of your ability.
That's really a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about most people, they have a lawn and they cut the grass, but it is mostly decorative, but it's not in use that often.
Yeah, you can definitely use it. Even front yards, people are afraid that, they don't want to have a compound with a giant wall in the front, but they don't want to have a front yard because they want to use that space. And you can kind of walk that fine line between having it sort of semi-public and private, and getting as much use out of it as possible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So where do you see Seattle going in the next 10 years? Do you see that?
I think about it a lot. Seattle's jumping into the next tier of cities, and I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it's been discovered. When I grew up, Seattle was a place that I thought of being the edge of the map somewhere pretty far. I wasn't quite sure where it was. And now people know where Seattle is. Maybe it's beyond Amazon's, beyond Microsoft. It's a place that people want to be. So we're seeing a lot of clients move here without even jobs because they want to be in Seattle. Maybe they've heard about it somewhere. And it's desirable, it's beautiful, the weather's pretty good. So it seems pretty nice. And so I see sort of a sustained growth. It will likely taper off. I can't imagine it will keep going like this forever. But I think all the signs point to a really positive growth curve for the city.
That's great. Yeah. So if someone wanted to get a hold of you, tell us again first what you do, what your business is about, and then how would they get a hold of you?
Certainly. So we're Board and Vellum Architecture and Design. We're an architecture, landscape architecture, and interior design firm based up in Seattle and Capitol Hill. We're super friendly, approachable. We love to give information away and talk to anyone. You can reach us online at Board and Vellum, which is board like the wood board, BOARD, ANDV as in Victor, ELLUM.com. And any one of us will be happy to chat with you.
And can they call you on the phone?
I guess they could call me on the phone too. Our phone number is 206-707-8895. Although I think email typically works best, honestly.
So give us the email address.
And info is info@boardandvellum.com.
Perfect. Thank you, and thanks for the insight.
Thanks for having me.
A lot of things going on in Seattle. Seattle is on the move. So I want to shift the story and talk about the Eiffel Tower. Today is like a lot of history, but there's an application as well. So the Eiffel Tower in Paris was originally built for the 1889 Universal Exhibition, which was to mark the 100th centennial of the French Revolution. The French Revolution happened, and the official date was 1789, like ours is 1776. Theirs was 1789. But the city went out and they sought competition from different architects and different design firms. And they set it up so that they allowed just 20 years for the structure to exist. And they chose the one that was designed by Eiffel. And he put up the tower, the Eiffel Tower, and that rule said that the tower needed to be taken down after 20 years. And so when 1909 came, the city was still intent on demolishing the tower. But there was a radio tower at the very top of the Eiffel Tower, and the city was persuaded by the French telegraph officials and the army that the tower was serving as a useful transmitting beacon. And it was on those grounds that the Eiffel Tower was allowed to remain. Aren't you happy for that if you've been to Paris and have been to the Eiffel Tower? Aren't you happy that it wasn't torn down in 1909? But along comes a conman who we're going to talk about in the next segment. So don't go away. He's the guy that decides he's going to sell the Eiffel Tower. And he did it not once, he did it twice. A guy by the name of Victor Lustig. He was a guy who actually, before he sold the Eiffel Tower, developed a machine that printed $100 bills. Yep, $100 bills. You want to know how he did it? Right after commercial break, I'll tell you how he got these printed.
Stay tuned. About Money returns in a moment with Mike Adams here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
How do you picture retirement? House on the beach, small farm in the country, traveling the world with your spouse. The one thing you don't picture is running out of money. Retirement dreams are shattered all too often by poor investment choices, sending many retirees back to work. If you think the job market is tough now, try entering it after you've retired. Don't run out of money. Start planning now. Call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts today at 206-903-1019 and learn more about how you can create wealth for retirement and probably, most importantly, protect yourself from running out of money. Adams Financial Concepts specializes in creating and maintaining wealth. Call today, 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
About Money continues. Remember the website adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So I've been talking about, or started to talk about, the Eiffel Tower, built in 1889 on a contract that it had to be torn down after 20 years. It was built to celebrate the French Revolution, the centenary of the French Revolution. But because of a radio tower on the very top, the city was persuaded to keep the tower. And along comes a con man by the name of Victor Lustig, who invented a machine to print $100 bills. So it took about 6 hours to print each $100 bill. And you paid, he would demonstrate it, it would print a $100 bill perfectly. So you paid about $30,000 to develop this machine. Started the machine, And after 6 hours, the first $100 bill came out. Another 6 hours, and it was a blank sheet of paper, and a blank sheet of paper, and a blank sheet of paper. By that time, however, Lustig was gone, and you just parted with $30,000 for a machine that had one $100 bill built into it. That's the guy that comes along. And in 1925, Paris is booming. World War I is over. Paris is booming. But there's news articles saying that the city was finding it difficult to maintain the Eiffel Tower. This tower that was supposed to be torn down in 1909 still needed paint, needed maintenance. So Lustig goes to a guy and gets him to forge some government stationery and invites 6 scrap metal dealers to a meeting at the Hotel de Crillon. Now, if you've been to Paris, you know the Hotel de Crillon is sitting there in the center of Paris, very close to the center of Paris, and he sets up a confidential meeting, and he claims that he's the Deputy Director General of the Ministries of Post and Telegraph. And the city wants to sell the Eiffel Tower for scrap, but they want to do it in a secret way, because if people find out they're selling the Eiffel Tower, they'll be really upset. In the first place, a lot of people didn't like the Eiffel Tower, but by 1925, Paris is in love with the Eiffel Tower. And Lustig says they need to do it in a very secret way. And he's the person responsible for getting the deal done. Now, one of the 6 scrap dealers that shows up is a guy by the name of André Poisson. He was somebody that, as a scrap metal dealer, was essentially outside the inner circle of the top people in Paris. Wanted to be in the top people. His wife really wanted to be. He had suspicions about Lustig, but, here's Lustig, who said he's not making enough money for the government and also needs a bribe to go along with this. And if the bribe is enough, he'll award the job to Poisson. So Poisson gets the job. Now, Poisson means fish in French. He was the fish. Is that where we get the expression of a fish? I play poker sometimes, and you look around the table. The expression is you look around the table, and if you don't see a fish, you are the fish. Is that where we get the expression? Who knows? But anyway, Poisson decides to buy the Eiffel Tower to make it for scrap. Lustig receives the money, gets a big bribe, and nothing ever happens. And Poisson is so embarrassed that he's been scammed and he does nothing, doesn't report it to anybody. So Lustig says, if he's not going to do anything, I'm going to do this the second time. And he does. He gathers together again 6 scrap metal dealers, gives them the same story, says whoever gives him the biggest bribe is going to get the job. He gets a big bribe, gets paid for the whole thing, and he takes off to America. It didn't work out so well because the second person didn't stay quiet, reported it to the authorities. The authorities pick him out, find him, and the end is not such a good deal for Lustig. But poor Poisson, the fish, never reports it, never gets his money back. No, nothing ever happens. The whole point is there's a lot of things that are given the appearance. When you look at them, they seem to have the appearance of being feasible and right. I use it on modern portfolio theory and asset allocation. Asset allocation seems to make a lot of sense. It's putting your money into different asset categories so that if one goes down, others are going up, so that you broaden your scope. They do a triangle. You've probably seen the triangle where the safe money is at the bottom and then more risky money in the middle, and the riskiest money, the stocks, are at the very top. That's risk money. And the idea is to put more of your money in safe monies. and less money in the risk money. But what that does is it keeps it safer perhaps for a shorter time, but in the long run, it's destructive. Because safe money today is paying 1 or 2%. Well, the stock market has been roaring along since 2009. Yeah, little difference of 100 years there. Since 2009, it's been roaring along in the double digits. So if you put the biggest portion of your money in something that's paying 1% and a little bit of money in something that's paying 12 or 13%, what's that do to your total return? You know, it may feel safer for a couple years, but after 3 or 4 years, what you find is you could have taken a lot more risk and been a lot further ahead. That's the issue. I've talked about 10 as the new 4 a number of times, because it used to be that you could put 4% away in your retirement fund and at the end of your life be able to take out something that kept you at 80% of your income. Today, to do the same thing, people talk about putting 10% into your 401k because you need that in order to take out a lower amount than you used to be able to take, a lower percentage. That, to me, is the great fish of financial planning. I believe there's a real problem. It sounds so logical. It sounds so rational. And yet when you look at it in the long run, if you're doing that, you're the fish. You're the fish. You're the poisson. You bought the Eiffel Tower from the conman. You know, I'm one of the very few that says that. I'm one of the very few that says you need to improve your returns, but I feel that that's really the place that it needs to be. It needs to be there in your 401k. It needs to be there in your individual accounts. It needs to be there in your IRAs and your other funds. The right place to be is an increased return. 1% difference over 20 years will decrease your nest egg by 17%. Think of what 2 or 3 or 4% will do. Anyway, that wraps up the program for today. Have a great weekend. It's the long weekend, Labor Day. So have a very good Labor Day, and I will be back next week to talk about money. Until then, have a good weekend.
You've been listening to About Money with Mike Adams, a registered investment advisor. If you'd like more information about what you heard today or about Mike's investment philosophy and strategy, or if you want Mike to evaluate your own portfolio, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com. The information shared on the preceding program was for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. Join us again for more About Money with Mike Adams here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL.
The preceding program was sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts. Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's Adams Financial Concepts.